Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst, Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football.
To another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, here with Keith Myers. Keith, we finished the preseason schedule. 1, 2, 3 games were out and finished up with a nice win, 27-0 at home against the Los Angeles Chargers. Didn't learn too much about the Chargers. Didn't learn too much about quite a few of our starters, but it was a better game, a better brand of football overall than we've seen so far.
Absolutely, it was better. And so I think really that comes down to what we wanted to see. We wanted to see some execution on offense. Now, we expected the execution to come when the starters came in, but to see the execution happen finally with the backups, even though there were no starters, that was still a great thing for us to see and something we've been looking forward to.
Yeah. You know, they had quite a bit of folks sitting out in this game. Most of the big name guys were out of this game. We did have some solid contributions all the way around. This show is going to be focusing on the roster predictions. Mm-hmm. This is technically our 5th annual roster prediction show. And in the past, we've turned this thing into about an hour and 20. And we're going to try to race through this thing in probably a little over a half an hour. We'll see how close we can get to a half an hour. I'm not going to be a stickler on the time on this show. We'll just get through it and try to make it as short as we can. Yep. This is a fun show. And in the past, Keith, you and I have been fairly accurate, give or take a name.
Yeah,
on a 53-man roster.
And the other thing that you and I can't predict is when John Snyder goes out and makes a trade as rosters are being set to bring in some random person, that was going to get cut off another team. But they go in and they trade a conditional 7th round pick 5 years from now in order to get them and not have to deal with waivers and all of that kind of stuff. So we don't try and take that stuff into consideration, but as far as really 45 of these guys are guaranteed.
Yeah. Right.
It's really the other 8 that's not. And they're the ones
we don't take any pride in this exercise. This is just an exercise for fun.
Yeah,
exactly. Now for me, the only real question marks for me were 1 or 2 players that I would need to put on to at least an initial IR list in order for my list to actually happen. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to predict because there's a couple of players with those scenarios, and I'm not sure if the team's going to elect to go that way or not. And we'll have to see. But yeah, let's just run down. Let's just go and kind of find out where we're at, see how much agreement we have, see where we disagree, and maybe we can have conversations around those. So let's start with quarterback, Keith.
Wilson
no
and
surprises
Gino,
here.
Done.
Yeah.
Although I will say that Sean Mannion has been a nice, steady addition since he came in. He definitely made the other 2 guys look terrible, which they were. But he just came in and was a massive improvement over.
Do you think he earned a job somewhere in the NFL?
I think he's earned a backup job. Absolutely. I think he came in, he learned the offense pretty quickly. Granted, he worked in it before, but it's been a couple of years and has looked good every time he's been out there. So I hope he earned a job somewhere. If not, I don't think he's practice squad eligible. He's been around too long, but he might be.
And I think this year they still have the same veteran practice squad eligibility as they had last year.
Cool. Then if they can do that, if he doesn't find another job elsewhere, keep him, put him on the practice squad, knowing that for him, he can leave at any moment to take a roster job on another team, or he can stick around here in Seattle and know the offense and be ready in case something bad happens and we end up, needing a third quarterback.
Running backs.
I've got 5.
Me too.
One of which is Nick Balor.
I did not have Nick Balor on my list for running backs.
You had him as a linebacker?
I did.
See, I
put him on the other side of the ball for this list.
Yeah, see, I have five. My five includes Nick Balor. I have him here just because I don't know, it fit. Or I could put him as a linebacker, and that would also fit. But I also have a linebacker that I have with a star next to his name that says "or Nick Balor."
Yeah.
So obviously Carson, Penny, Dallas, Collins. I think those four are guaranteed jobs, and then Balor's my fifth.
Yeah, I had Homer added to that list. So I've got Carson, Penny, Collins, Dallas, Homer, with Josh Johnson landing on the practice squad. And I just discussed that Nick Balor would be on my linebacker list, and I'll explain why when we get over to the defense.
Yeah, and I had Johnson landing on the practice squad. I just have Homer getting cut. So, all right.
And he may end up being one of those guys that they put on the unable to perform list, and to start the season. Get to week 8, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, he's a guy. I mean, he did come back to practice this last week, so that may be a little bit weird. But he might end up landing on a list, a reserve list, and so they'll keep him around, maybe on IR, but then see what happens. But
so
I don't.
There's a lot of speculation out there on the running back situation because of the situation in Baltimore and a couple other places around the league, that a guy like Alex Collins would be very much a asset that might be available that would bring Seattle's a pick back.
Yep.
I don't like that idea, but tell me why it could be viable. Tell me why it's not advisable.
Well, it's not advisable because he's been the best back as far as running the ball that we've seen in the preseason. Now, Carson's only played like 2 or 3 snaps, and Penny hasn't played much either. DJ Dallas has looked great out of the backfield as a receiver and as a kick returner, but as a runner, Collins has been the best, and you saw that in this game where he was making people miss and he looked outstanding. And so there's basically you have so many different people and only one football, and you're probably going to throw the ball a lot. So what do you do with when you have that many guys? Well, you use one of them as a trade asset and bring in an asset that you can get. You can get a 4th round pick out of Alex Collins because Baltimore is desperate. Go for it. I mean, they know Alex Collins.
Put Alex Collins out there before you would put DJ Dallas out there.
Yeah, but I'd see if I could dangle Rashad Penny and see if I can get a bigger return.
Yes. No, absolutely. Bigger return, that's debatable, Keith. The guy really, in 3 years.
Yeah, but what has Alex Collins
hasn't done anything.
He's had 2/3 of one good year and then got cut, and he's spent time on practice squads and whatnot. So I just don't know if you can get a 4th round for Alex Collins, don't you think you can get a 3rd for Rashad Penny?
No. And the reason being is because of availability.
Yeah, we'll see.
You've got to be available in the NFL in order to be worth anything. And so far, Penny isn't worth that to us. Why would he be worth that to somebody else?
Because they're desperate, and
if somebody's desperate, they want a running back that can actually come in and play, not one that might not play because he can't even get healthy enough to be on the roster that week. I'm just saying, that would be my thing. If I was a GM, I'd steer clear of Penny, given the vast upside that he's got for the steady thing in Alex Collins.
Yeah,
I know that Alex Collins is not going to give me more than 50 yards a game on 10 to 15 touches, but he's going to be there every game.
Yeah. I would just say that there are GMs that would absolutely agree with you, and others that see Penny was a 1st round pick. He's got 1st round pick talent. There's upside there that you could bring in a guy who could be your guy and be the guy, and that's worth more than bringing in a guy that he may not get hurt, or he'll be there, but he's never going to be more than a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I agree that this conversation that we are having right now is happening all across the league in at least 3 or 4 different offices.
Yeah.
And Penny's name is in the equation.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is it going to get to the point where somebody picks up the phone to John and offers him a 4th, even a 5th? I wouldn't take anything less than a 5th, or a 5th and a player, like throw me a backup center or something,
Yeah.
That might be an option.
Or a cornerback.
All right. So wide receiver.
Okay. So wide receiver. You want to start?
Yeah, this is an interesting list, Keith. I'll start with the people that I put on the practice squad.
How many people do you have on the roster?
I've got 26 on offense.
No. How many wide receivers do you have making the 53-man roster? 7. I have 6.
I know. This was the hardest part of the list right here.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I'll tell you who I have. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Dwayne Eskridge, Freddie Swain, Penny Hart, and then I had Cody Thompson, just by the skin of his teeth, over Cade Johnson on the 53.
That's only 6.
Yeah. Okay. So I had 6. Sorry.
Okay, you said 7. So I was like, wait, I was thinking that you meant you had both of them.
And so I have John Ursua starting
he's on
the
IR.
Entire year on IR. Aaron Fuller's cut. Travis Toivonen is cut. Connor Weddington, Doris Robertson, Cade Johnson to the practice squad. That's my list. Do you have anything that's different?
I do. I have Cody Thompson not on the roster and Cade Johnson on the roster.
Yeah. See, those were totally interchangeable.
I went with the younger guy that has more team control, and that's the only.
And that totally makes sense. I figured that Cade might be able to get to the practice squad, but he's one of those names, a known entity out there that may get picked off right away. Mm-hmm. So Cody Thompson, the team has really been outwardly spoken in his favor throughout camp as a guy that they believe in, that's come in and done a good job. He's also a bigger body guy, which is lacking a little bit on this roster. And so I went with the bigger body receiver and Cody Thompson at a known quantity that the team trusts at this point over Cade Johnson, who's just really getting started. And that was the tipping point for me.
Yeah, I can see it. Like I said, I went with the younger player who's got cheaper player with more years of team control, entirely just because, and that's the only reason.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think Cade Johnson has the upside to make this roster. It's the question of, what does the team elect to do? Are they going to,
I'll tell you,
with the tight end group combined with the running backs and the wide receivers, and you can even throw an offensive lineman equation into this if you want. I did have 26 total offensive players on my list.
I have 25. I will say that in the battle between Cade Johnson and Cody Thompson, the winner will be whoever the team thinks is better on special teams. It has nothing to do with who's better as a wide receiver.
Well, I tell you, Cade Johnson has more upside as a returner, but Cody Thompson might have more upside as a gunner. I don't know.
Yeah, but it comes down to who is more important. Because if you're the 6th wide receiver on the roster, your ability to impact a game as a wide receiver is secondary to your ability to impact a game as a special teams contributor. And so whoever is better at that from the team's point of view, they're the one that will make the roster. Okay, do you have 3 tight ends or 4?
I have 3.
Are they Disley, Everett, and Parkinson?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Parkinson had a question mark with regards to, will the team elect to start him on some sort of list and bring up Tyler Mabry or somebody that's not yet on the roster?
I don't think so. Pete Carroll said that, he may not be ready for week 1, but he's trying really hard to get ready for week 1. But that to me sounds like he's going to be ready in weeks 1, 2, or 3. And they're not going to put him on IR and then not be able to play him until week 7 or 8. And so it's going to make more sense for them to keep him around.
That's why you made my list. Yep. And then Tyler Mabry's on the practice squad.
Yep.
Luke Wilson's already gone. Cam Sutton's cut.
Okay, offensive line, right? Can we agree that Brown, Lewis, Jackson, and Shell are going to be the starters?
Yes.
And then we don't know Posick or Fuller, but both of them are making the roster.
I do have Ethan Posick starting on a list.
See, he came back to practice last week, and actually, according to Pete Carroll, he could have played in this game, but they chose not to, just entirely for precautionary reasons.
Okay, that's fine. I've got him in red here, and I've got Kyle Fuller being the guy. I know, but that's the way it went for me. That's the way it got me to my list. I also had Jake Curran making this roster, and that's how I was able to do it.
And I don't. He was literally the last offensive player.
I know. That's what it came down.
And that's how you ended up. That's how you ended up with 26 instead of 25.
Correct. And Ethan Posick on injured reserve. So, because what I did is tackle wise, I went with Dwayne Brown, Shell, Abuahe, Jamarco Jones, Storm Forsyth, and Jake Curran, with Tommy Champion getting cut, Greg Island making the practice squad. Guards Damian Lewis, Gabe Jackson, Jordan Simmons, Phil Haynes, Jared Hawker, practice squad, Pierre Olivier Lestage, practice squad, Ethan Posick on injured reserve, Kyle Fuller starting, Brad Lundblade cut.
Okay, because we do have some differences here. So tackle, I've got Brown and Shell as the starters, Abuahe and Forsyth as the backups, and that's it.
So Jamarco Jones?
No Jamarco Jones. In fact, I had Jamarco Jones getting cut before Jake Curran.
See, the interesting thing about the preseason game 3, if you paid attention, was that Jamarco Jones lined up at both left tackle and right tackle.
I know he did. Yep.
So that was an interesting thing for me, just because if the team views him that way and he's actually has that ability, he may make that team over Jake Curran. I just don't know.
Maybe. I think he only makes the team if Cedric Abuahe is unable to go, and so then he is there as your swing tackle.
Yeah. Well,
rather than relying on the young kids.
The way that I handled it is I put 26 on the offensive roster.
Yep.
So, and I did the same thing last year too, and so did the team.
Yep. I didn't have Jordan Simmons making this roster either.
Yeah, that's big. So who did you have?
Obviously Lewis and Jackson, Posick and Fuller. So those, kind of the inside to go with Phil Haynes. And then I looked at this and said, okay, maybe we can get like Cedric Abuahe to slide inside if they needed an extra guard. But really you've got the backup Posick or Fuller, whoever's not starting is also a backup guard. And so you had Haynes and one of those guys are both swing guys that can play all three interior positions.
I'm afraid that Jake Curran goes to the practice squad. He's gone.
I don't know.
I really thought that performance this offseason, there's a lot of desperate teams in that 9 and 10th lineman spots around the league. And
especially
guy
for
like
a guy
Jake
that
Curran,
looks like he might be able to develop into something that can play.
Exactly. So my fear would be if I don't keep that guy around, I'm going to lose him. I might not lose him in week 1 or 2, but he's not going to be there for the full season. So, anywho, that was my offense. Let's start with defensive tackle on the other side.
Okay, so I have Ford, Woods, and Monet, kind of the 3 obvious ones making it. I currently have penciled in Robert Kimdiche with an asterisk saying that Geno Atkins came in and they're looking at him for a reason. And if he ends up signing, it's Kimdiche who gets jettisoned.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't write that down, but I put Robert Kimdiche based on the veteran options on the practice squad. I did put him on the practice squad. So if he does want to stick around, he would have to go. He would have to go there on my list because I have Woods, Ford, and Monet as well. And then I've got Jared Hewitt making the practice squad. And I have Miles Adams and Walter Palmore. Outright.
Hewitt was, you have Hewitt on the practice squad or on the roster?
Practice squad.
Okay. So this is where you picked up you're down at only 24 instead of 25. Is it you?
Correct.
You lost a defensive tackle because you know that you've got LJ Collier and company that can slide inside.
That's exactly correct.
Yep. I kept Kimdiche around with the idea that it would be Geno Atkins, but I also cut someone else who I think you'll probably have on yours in the defensive end category. So let's go there. Because I
ended up not cutting anybody on the defensive end list, and my linebacker list though is expanded.
Okay, so for defensive end, Dunlap, Hyder, Alton Robinson, Rasheem Green, LJ Collier.
Yeah,
I've got 5.
I have Benson Mayowa.
and he is not on my roster.
And he would be the last guy on mine as well. Although I had question marks around Rasheem Green and Collier before the preseason. Rasheem Green came through and Collier not so much, but I'm not exactly sure if Collier was just held out of plays, didn't get a lot of action from the team, or if he just really is struggling and they're really trying to figure that out. I know that Pete kind of said something publicly about Rasheem Green and Collier battling it out for one of those inside spots because there wasn't really going to be a lot of room on the outside for them, which means those guys are really looking at a 3-tackle rotation type of a job. And that's why I was comfortable moving on from one of the defensive tackles, because I think one of those guys for sure is going to be a pretty heavy rotation guy in there. And it looks like Rasheem Green.
Yeah.
Now,
and so
LJ Collier could be like in a rotation with Kerry Hyder on that 5-tech. And so a lot of stuff could move around there. I'm not sure.
See, I ended up debating Benson Mayowa versus Robert Nkemdiche. And
boy, I would go with the known quantity there. I love the idea of Robert Nkemdiche, but man, has he not done it so far in the NFL in 3+ years.
Well, and with Mayowa, for me, it was just a matter of when does he play? Because he's the, you look at defensive end, Dunlap and Hyder are your starters. You have Robinson, one of Green Collier because the other one's inside. And you've also got Darrell Taylor, who I'm counting as a linebacker, who's going to play considerable snaps at defensive end.
And we saw that in the preseason.
When does Mayowa actually get on the field?
Yeah, he's going to have to come in for an injury. You got a situation like Alton Robinson, Carlos Dunlap are your primary Leo guys, along with Darrell Taylor pulling in some of that as well.
Yeah, and your 5-tech is Kerry Hyder and Rasheem Green.
and Kerry Hyder can really get after it from multiple positions. So it does make Benson Mayowa expendable if you want him to be. I would fear, it's a long season. It's 17 games this year. Losing one of your premier guys that can really is a specialist to get to the quarterback, cutting that guy outright at the beginning and then wishing you hadn't, 6 or 7 games into it is tough, but you got to make these cuts. They're hard cuts.
But I'm just saying, like, if you keep him, maybe you keep him and you figure out how to keep him happy sitting on the bench and not playing, but then you cut Robert Nkemdiche, and I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with them going with an extra defensive end, one fewer defensive tackle, knowing that Collier and Green will slide inside, and Hayter sometimes as well.
Linebacker Bobby Wagner,
hard, yeah.
Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, Darrell Taylor, obviously Cody Barton. There were some folks out there thinking that Cody Barton was on the bubble at some point. Cody Barton was never on the bubble. He's always had this upside.
He's your primary backup he's your primary backup at all 3 spots and a special team star. He's not going anywhere.
And then I had Nick Balor.
So
I had Bobby Wagner, Jordan Brooks, Darrell Taylor, Cody Barton, Nick Balor. Nick Balor he played well.
He did.
Like he played not just he's really a fullback, but he's actually really a linebacker who went to play fullback, and now he's back to playing linebacker. And he spent his entire college career doing that, and he spent the first part of his career in the NFL playing linebacker as a solid rotation guy and a backup. And he looks sufficient out there, at least enough to where I wouldn't be terribly worried, maybe a little bit in coverage if he had to come in and fill in for a game or whatever. I mean, that is what it is. I'd be concerned, but what happens if one of the top 4 gets hurt is they just play more nickel and don't need the third linebacker. He'll never see the field. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
Alex Changum is gone. I think he was already cut. Aaron Donker is on the practice squad, but they have an exemption.
So you get an extra spot on the practice squad.
We get an extra spot. So he's my 16th guy. Nate Evans is gone. John Radigan is on the practice squad. I think the team really wanted to keep him. Now, if I put Nick Balor over onto the running back list and Travis Homer was gone, I think that John Radigan would be my fifth linebacker.
Yep. So I have Nick Balor over and Homer gone. And John Radigan is my fifth linebacker. With an asterisk that says KJ Wright next to it.
Yeah.
Because I could, after the Ben Burkervin injury.
What would you rather have, John Radigan or KJ Wright for a year? I mean,
KJ Wright.
John Radigan for possibly 4 years or KJ Wright for 1 year.
I would still want KJ Wright because I think John Radigan is a guy that you can, push through to the practice squad. I don't know if
there's a lot of John Radigans in the NFL. Let's be honest.
There's only one KJ Wright. And so I just think that getting him an opportunity, like the Ben Burkervin injury opened up a spot at linebacker because you knew who the five were until he got hurt. When he got hurt, now it's like, okay, do we count Balor as that fifth linebacker, or do we count Radigan as it, or now we have a spot on the roster for a KJ Wright. And so now maybe they bring him in and he gets to, 2 or 3 weeks of not playing, but getting himself back up to speed and, in shape and all of that. And then they can sprinkle him in at times and let him be the leader and stuff that he is. And he'll play if they need him to. But
I really like the fine details, the subtle kind of ways that you and I have approached this, because we're fairly unified, but uniquely different in a couple different spots in the way that we tried to patch this thing together. And I love it actually, because it's a unique kind of, look inside of how these decisions are kind of made. Let's go to safety.
Okay.
This was pretty easy.
Yep.
One of the easier lists. Adams, Diggs, Blair, Amati, and then Ryan Neal. I started on the list of. You
started him on IR, huh?
Reserve. Yeah, because who knows? And I just needed the spot. I needed the spot. If Ryan Neal's healthy, he's there. If he's nicked up at all and he's going to miss 2 or 3 weeks to open the season because of that pectoral thing, and it could be longer, I would imagine they'd probably opt to have somebody on the roster for the first 3 or 4 weeks anyway. So I had Jordan Miller cut, Ashari Crosswell, Joshua Moon, and Lakeem Williams on the practice squad.
Yeah. So I had Adams, Diggs, Blair, and Neal making the team. I counted Amati as a cornerback. He hasn't really done anything at safety with the Seahawks. They've pretty much moved him to corner. Yes, he's done a little bit of backup free safety in practice.
They have him listed as a free safety.
They've had him listed as a free safety since they drafted him, but he hasn't played free safety. He's played slot corner, and that's who he is in this team. So I didn't count him as a safety at all. So I had Ryan Neal as the fourth safety.
Yeah. Where's he at? Do you know?
Pete Carroll said that, it's there, he's got the pectoral injury. They think it's not anything major. But he's a guy that, he could be back, week 1, week 2. So,
and then what else? Same guys on the practice squad?
Yeah, for the most part. And then at cornerback, obviously Reed, Witherspoon, Amati, Brown, and Flowers. I've got those 5.
Interesting.
Who do you have?
Well, this is where we diverge. And it all comes down to Ryan Neal, I guess, is the crux here. But DJ Reed, Witherspoon, Flowers, Brown, Demarius Randall, John Reed.
Okay.
So I went with 6 defensive backs and 4 safeties.
Yeah. And see, right now I have 5 and 4. Here's the thing. I have 24 listed guys on defense. I have 25 spots. What I have is a last spot list. And it comes down to Mayoa, Reed, Hewitt, and Crosswell.
Wow.
And
who plays special teams the best?
Who plays special teams the best? Probably Crosswell or Reed because they're defensive backs, so they're faster.
Did you say Demarius Randall was on this bubble?
No.
You're going to cut Demarius Randall?
I'm going to cut Demarius Randall. I don't see a reason why not to.
I think the team likes him.
He isn't in the top 5 safeties on the team. He isn't in the top 6 or 7 corners. So the fact that he can play both,
how do you know
doesn't mean anything to me. I've watched him play.
I disagree with you.
He isn't better than Ryan Neal or Blair or Diggs or Adams and honestly, from what I saw, he's not better than Crosswell. He's not. To me, he isn't a top 5 safety.
Yeah, and you could very well be right on this list, but I would think that the team is still feeling somewhat unsettled in its defensive backs as it goes into the regular season, and I think that's why they carry an extra one, just because A, those guys are typically very, very good special teams players, and B, I think that they're going to have to work this out during the season. And in order to do that, they need an extra guy. That was my
true, but to me, it isn't him. He's not the extra guy.
It's John Reed.
It's John Reed.
So would you choose John Reed then over Crosswell, Kimdichie, and I can't remember the last guy.
Okay, so I have Kimdichie on the roster. It's Mayoa, Hewitt, Crosswell, and Reed are at 4 different positions. One of those 4 is going to make it. And you know what? I'm sitting here as we're having this conversation and realize I just read that Kimdichie got hurt again. Like I read this earlier this morning. And so, and now I'm thinking, I'm like, you know what? You're right. I think he's gone. He's on our IR and Mayo is on the roster. And so that means one of the 3 of Hewitt, Crosswell, and Reed makes it. And honestly, I think Reed, because they gave up something for him.
You can put Hewitt on the practice squad.
Yep. Well, and I think you can get Crosswell.
He's got the least value.
Yeah. And you can get Crosswell into the practice squad as well as a safety.
Yeah.
And so both of those guys, I think you can push through.
And you just traded for Reed. Well, you got to want to see what you've got.
Yeah, you trade, but they gave up nothing, and it's a conditional pick. So
I understood from a couple of the beat writers that Reed was a guy that was draftable, had a draftable grade for the Seahawks, and missed out on him, and so they've been kind of wanting him.
Yep. So he's a guy that they've liked for a while, and he was available, so they went and got him. And I think he makes the team out of those 3 guys. But it comes down to, what does the team feel it needs most? Does it need an extra body up front in case one of the guys get dinged? Do they need an extra corner, or do they want an extra safety because of the Ryan Neal injury?
Say an extra corner because of the reasons that I outlined earlier. I think you agree, and they can pull that defensive tackle or pull that safety from the practice squad. I think on any given week this year, I think the same rules apply.
Last year, you can bring up 2 guys. Yeah, you can bring a single guy up 3 times, and then after that, you can't push him back down. You either have to cut him or keep him.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and so all that kind of comes into play still. And so you and I have similar strategies with a couple of differences on players. We had the Nick Balor strategy. We had
well, you have Homer making the roster, and I don't.
Yes, right.
And that's really, and so you push. By keeping Homer, you push Balor to defense and cut Radigan.
Yeah, and then I kept Jake Curran on the roster. So those were the primary differences between us. So I had 26 total on offense, 24 on defense.
Yeah, you kept Jake Curran instead of Ryan Neal.
That's correct.
That's really the big difference there is you think Ryan Neal's not good. I think Ryan Neal's on the roster. I think he's
on the roster if he's healthy.
Yeah.
I think the team, puts him on the list if he's not.
If he is.
And same with Ethan Posick. I use Ryan Neal and Ethan Posick to make my roster.
Yeah.
Because I started those guys on injured reserve.
That's how you got Curran on the roster. And
and if it's not Posick or Neal, it's somebody else. because there's just a certain amount of spots. There's a certain amount of personnel that you're going to want to keep.
Yep.
Everyone that we've talked about, we are in 100% agreement on who we just outright cut. And it's these 2 or 3 players on the periphery that we're trying to figure out how they either get on the roster or how we protect them. Because
because it's a 53-man roster. We've only talked about 50 players. The punter, kicker, and long snapper. I'm sorry, there's only one of each, and they're all making the roster. They're all very good at what they do.
Yeah, Michael Dixon, geez, that guy.
He had one of those kicks that kind of looked like it defied physics. Right at the end of the game, and that's just amazing. But anyway, so those 3 guys are going to make it. That makes it up to 53. But of the 53, like I said earlier, 45 anybody can name. I mean, they're really easy. It's how do you get those last 8 spots, and wiggle those in, and that can be hard at times because you've got guys like, Hewitt and Cody Thompson, Jake Curran.
They really like him too.
I mean, they should like him. He looks good out there.
So when we come back on to record later in the week for our second show, it's going to be basically kind of a roster review show. So we're going to kind of give ourselves a grade on all this kind of stuff, all this, haggling and so forth. We'll see if there's a name or 2 that we didn't even mention because they're not on the team yet joins this roster.
Yeah.
They do have a little bit of time though. The time crunch right now is not as big as it usually is because there's a 2-week gap now until the regular season.
Yeah. Usually what's happening is that, they have this final preseason game, and then they have about 48 hours to set the roster. And so they set the initial 53. 24 hours after that, all of the players that were waived, if they were claimed by someone, causes another round of cuts because, if you claim someone, you got to kick someone off your roster. And then if those that aren't claimed can either be signed to the practice squad, some of them will revert to IR if they were waived injured. And so, you have this like flurry of like movement.
Oh, it's crazy.
And they've got to get it.
There's 800 to 1,000 cuts coming by 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Yeah. And so we're still going to have that, but usually that is on Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah.
Sunday there's a game, right? So you got to have this all figured out because you got to get your game plan implemented. And if you're bringing in anyone new, are they going to be ready? You have to have all this stuff ready for Sunday. Now you've got a whole nother week. So you can play with it a little bit more and set, your roster and then be like, no, we don't really like the way this is working, or this person's not coming back from injury as fast as and you can make a couple more changes and get things ready. It's not as time pressed where you're just slamming through all of these moves right at once to get them all done.
Yeah. Interesting. Fun times. This is always the fun. I mean, it's not fun for these guys. I mean, getting cut is on a roster when your dreams are getting crushed is absolutely devastating. But it's interesting from a fan perspective, an analysis perspective, where you can kind of get into the weeds a little bit on this thing and try to figure it out. So we'll come back on Wednesday, Thursday this week, record the second show, figure out the roster, all of the transactions and practice squad should be made up by then. And we'll see how we did. We'll see whose strategy on these 2 or 3 different decisions that we made proved to be mostly correct. Yeah. That'll be fun.
Cool.
All right. We're out of here for today. Thanks for joining us again. We really appreciate it. You can find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com has all of the shows, and you can subscribe to our podcast on any major podcast platform and YouTube. YouTube is the big one. We seem to get a lot of activity on there. We have a lot of good discussion on the back end there below the videos. And so that's always fun. So make sure you subscribe to that channel. It would be awesome. So till next time, Keith, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Phil is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.